Welcome to another explainer right here on the Agile Auditor at Risk Vigilant Bharat. All right, today we're jumping into a really sharp investigative briefing, and it's built specifically for you, the internal auditors and freshers out there on the front lines of corporate risk. We're looking at something called the Price Escalation Clause. I like to call it the inflation-proof contract. Look, we're going to tear down a massive misconception in procurement today. This idea that a perfectly fixed price is always a huge win. Spoiler alert, it's not. As you're going to see, an entirely inflexible contract can actually be a ticking time bomb, just waiting to completely destroy an organization's supply chain.
So picture a literal supply chain crime scene for a second. A vendor signs this major 3-year contract to supply a factory with steel at a perfectly fixed price. Now the buyer's procurement team is popping champagne, right? They think they've scored a massive victory. But then, year 2 rolls around. A global crisis hits, and global steel prices absolutely triple overnight. So what actually happens? The vendor just goes totally insolvent, trying to fulfill the orders at that old locked-in price. And because the vendor goes under, well, the materials stop arriving. Ultimately, the buyer's factory is forced to just shut down entirely. Why did this happen? Well, it's because the buyer completely ignored the absolute necessity of a safety mechanism to handle extreme market volatility.
So what's the actual fix here? Let's keep it simple, zero jargon. A price escalation clause is basically a safety net built directly into long-term contracts. It's just a strict mathematical formula that allows the vendor's price to automatically increase or, hey, even decrease based on official, independent market changes. We're talking about things like extreme inflation or massive fuel spikes. This isn't about just handing the vendor extra profit. It is a highly calculated survival mechanism. It makes sure the vendor doesn't go broke during a global crisis, which in turn makes absolutely sure your supply chain doesn't collapse.
Let's think about this using an everyday example, kind of like renting an apartment for 5 years. If you force your landlord to lock in the exact same rent for all 5 years, they're slowly going to lose money to inflation. Eventually, they might just stop fixing your broken plumbing out of pure spite, right? Because the whole arrangement just isn't financially viable for them anymore. But instead, think about a fair lease that includes an escalation clause, saying the rent will increase exactly 5% every single year. This protects you, the tenant, from the landlord just suddenly doubling the rent overnight. But it also securely protects the landlord's business from being eaten alive by inflation. In the end, both parties survive.
Moving on to corporate application, specifically looking at XYZ Limited Logistics.
Let's see how this plays out in a real workplace scenario. Imagine a manager named Ria. She signs a 5-year logistics contract with vendor A to run delivery trucks all across the country. Now, as we all know, fuel prices fluctuate literally every single day. So instead of getting into a shouting match over prices with the vendor every single month, Ria takes a way smarter approach. She ties the contract directly to the government's official diesel price index. The mechanics are super simple. If the official national diesel index jumps by 10%, the vendor's transport fee automatically goes up by a pre-agreed mathematical percentage. It's instant and it's indisputable. And hey, it works both ways. If diesel prices drop, XYZ Limited automatically gets a discount. No arguing, no monthly renegotiating. It's just pure math doing the heavy lifting to keep the contract fair and totally functional over 5 years.
So the absolute crucial point here is knowing exactly when to use which type of contract. Let's break down this confusion buster table because, beginners and fresher auditors constantly fall into this trap of thinking they should just force vendors into fixed prices forever. If you look at fixed-price contracts, honestly, these are really only best for short-term projects. We're talking anything under 12 months. Why? Because the vendor is absorbing 100% of the risk. If market prices suddenly spike, they might literally abandon your project just to save themselves. But on the flip side, price escalation contracts are designed specifically for long-term agreements, usually spanning 2 to 5 years. The risk is shared fairly. It keeps the vendor alive during global financial crises, which guarantees that your factory actually keeps getting its materials without interruption.
Okay, but we have to look at this through a strict investigative lens now. The ultimate auditor's red flag is what we call fake math, or uncapped escalation. As auditors, we are constantly hunting for these poorly written contracts where a lazy buyer just allowed the vendor to dictate their own price hikes. Imagine looking at a contract and seeing that the vendor can simply say, hey, my electricity bill went up, so pay me 20% more. They are raising prices based entirely on their own internal unverified costs. Make no mistake, if you see this while you're auditing, that is a literal blank check for fraud. It is a wide open door for suppliers to just pass all of their own inefficiencies directly onto your company.
So how do we shut down this blank check? Simple. We enforce strict auditor mandates. First up, you absolutely must mandate strict maximum caps.
An escalation formula should never, ever be infinite. It needs a ceiling, for example, a hard maximum 5% per year cap. Second, and this is absolutely critical, you have to tie these mathematical formulas exclusively to verifiable third-party government indices. A perfect example of this is the Wholesale Price Index, or WPI. By anchoring the contract to an external reality that neither the buyer nor the vendor actually controls, you completely remove the opportunity for fake math and internal cost manipulation.
All right, let's lock in the core takeaway here. Escalation clauses use math to prevent market crashes from destroying your supply chain. They are strategic mathematical shields. They are absolutely not vendor handouts. By truly understanding the difference between a protective formula and a fraudulent blank check, you protect your organization's bottom line and its very operational survival. Which leaves us with a final question for you to take back to your desks today. If a simple lack of caps can drain an organization's budget this badly, what other fraudulent blank checks might be hiding deep inside your own long-term vendor agreements right now?